excellent to each other. And party on, dudes. I'm back with another legacy video where we are going to look at my newest build of TAMIYO Control. And it is very creature heavy, as you can see, 16 creatures. And it has quite a bit of removal main deck, and it has quite a bit of disruption. So what does it not have? It doesn't have cards like Up the Beanstalk, like I used to have in Bug Beans. It doesn't have cards like Witherbloom Command that are powerful card advantage value cards, but are a little bit slow and very color demanding. In fact, if you look at my mana base, you'll see it's incredibly simple. It's basically a ton of fetches. I think I've got 9 fetches. Then I've got a basic swamp, a basic island, a surveil land, the blue-black surveil land under city sewers, and 3 underground seas. And then I've got my 4 wastelands. And then I've got Sink into Stupor, which is a great card. It basically is kind of like having Brazen Borrowers number 3 and 4, but it also can be played as a land. And I play it a lot as a land in these leagues that you're going to watch. So as far as the creatures are concerned, we've got Orcish Bowmasters. I think they're still a 4 of. Psychic Frog, of course, does most of the killing in this TAMIYO. And when she's good, she's very good. And when she's not good, she only costs you 1 blue mana. And then Murktide Regent, I've just got 2 of those, but they do close a lot of games. And then, of course, Brazen Borrower, which end up winning some games as well. And then this deck is heavily stifle based. We really want to keep the opponent on low resources, and our curve basically tops out at 2. So the idea is we don't need a whole lot of dual lands. In fact, I'm not even playing like all 4 of the blue-black dual lands because we just never get that far into the game. Generally, like, you want to start holding lands once you've got 2 or 3 lands out because you can pitch them to Psychic Frog or you can brainstorm them back. There's not like a Lorien Revealed or any card that is pushing you to amass a whole lot of land here. And generally, because you're not drawing as many cards, you don't care as much. So this is a much more Delver-ish deck, but again, it has TAMIYO, and she is an engine, and she is going to potentially, draw you an extra card each turn, or potentially ultimate and draw you 20 cards. And of course, Psychic Frog, if Psychic Frog can connect, you're going to keep drawing cards. So let's take a look at some of the matches. I'm going to do as many of these as I can before my flight leaves to Japan, where I'm going to be going and playing this deck at the Haruruya Tournament Center in Shinjuku. I'm going to be playing a lot of tournaments there. They have 3 tournaments a day, so I'm very excited about that. And I am going to be playing this once I procure some of the cards on site. I got to find some TAMIYOs around Tokyo. Might be going to like Akihabara or some other neighborhoods that have a lot of Magic the Gathering card shops. Sideboard real quick. Damping Sphere. I noticed Pokemoki was playing 2 of these. I think it's pretty good against 12 post. It is incidentally good against combo, but that's not really what it's for. There's a lot of 12 post out there going around. I'm experimenting with this card, which I didn't want to play because the art looks, no offense to the artist, but it just looks like Abe Lincoln crying. And I can see why he would be crying, but it looks like something I would see in like kind of like a cheesy history book rather than on a Magic the Gathering card. But the card basically is an anti Eldrazi card. You can counter the Eldrazi, and you can also counter the abilities that go on the stack as cast triggers. I'm not totally sold that this is a good card, but I'm going to try it because I keep getting destroyed by Eldrazi. And then some additional removal. I've got a Shieldred's Edict to go for the throat. Harbinger of the Seas to potentially... This does play when we're up against Eldrazi, when we're up against 12 post. And then I've got a Dress Down, a Spell Pierce, a Hydroblast. So just like good general interaction. And then I've got 2 Surgicals because I don't have access to Ground Seal. I would love it if they printed a black or a blue Ground Seal, by the way, but I don't think that's going to happen. But Ground Seal was just absolutely amazing if you go back and watch my most recent video where I'm playing the bug version of this deck. And that's it. And then 3 Force Negations, which in a paper tournament, I probably wouldn't rock 3. I'd probably just have 1 or 2. But on MTGO, you never know what kind of weird combo stuff you're going to queue into. So let's dive into the matches. So I'm going to come over here, and our first match, this is kind of like an exhibition match. This was like the end of another league that I did pretty well. I think I 3-2'd. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, I 3-2'd it. But this was like a really fun series of games, and I wanted to share it with you because I think Delver is a really interesting matchup. Like, they have so many tools, and we have so many tools against them. So I throw back my first hand, which was a whole lot of cards that didn't have enough mana sources. And this Sink into Stupor is both a pitch to Force of Will and a land if I need it. This seems like a really solid mold to 6. Let's go ahead and get started here. Make this a little bit smaller. All right. So I'm on the draw. My opponent does the best thing that Delver can do on turn 1, which is Dragon's Rage Channeler into Mishra's Bauble. Start filling up their yard. Start getting some card selection, potentially. So they put Psychic Frog and Mishra's Bauble into the graveyard. So they've already got 2 card types, and they're close to getting this DRC Delirious. So I drew a Stifle for the turn, which is a little too late. Stifle's definitely better on the play than it is on the draw. And I sacrifice up TAMIYO to the Daze Gods. And, my opponent is able to daze that. Much better to have that daze than like a Psychic Frog or something. They're putting a Lightning Bolt into the yard, which is concerning because it makes me think that they probably already have another bolt. Here, I draw Wasteland, which doesn't really help me in the current situation. You don't generally want to waste from behind. I fetch. I am able to push, and they don't have the daze because, again, TAMIYO ate the daze earlier. So against Delver, one of the strategies is to just play in the daze and hope that you can get the daze out of their hand. So here I'm kind of like forced. I feel forced to bounce this Murktide back to hand because they're not going to be able to redeploy it with much power. But they do have a force. So this was a good play because we basically Hymn to Torque them, and we'll figure out a solution to this Murktide later, right? So we're going to take 6 here, which, again, against Delver, my strategy is don't let them do any damage to you at all because they can just burn you out at the end. So I play my Psychic Frog here, and they attack, and I dismember, but they have a force from my dismember. So what I was going to do is I was going to jump this up. I was going to dismember, and then I was going to kill it, and it would have been I probably would have had to pitch one of these cards, but it would be worth it to get rid of it because it was going to kill me. Unfortunately, they had the force. So I think they had the disruption I went through was daze and 2 Force of Will. So yeah, on the draw, like Delver's going to get you. Let's take a look at game 2. All right, so this is not a hand I would like to keep because it only has 1 mana, and as you can tell from like the way I constructed the deck, I very much value having mana. I don't like to play decks that have like 17 mana sources or even 18. Like I'm playing 21, I think, in this deck if you include the shock lands or the bolt lands, whatever you want to call them, the Sink into Stupors. So I ponder. I'm trying to set up. I clicked through real quick, so we didn't get to see what my ponder looked like. Wasteland comes out. I'm just going to try to deny them resources. I find another land, thankfully, off of my ponder. They're coming in for 3. They've got a Wasteland of their own. Unfortunately, my Flooded Strain cannot fetch my basic swamp, so I'm going to need to put one of my lands into the red zone. Okay. Got another one. So now I think I can fetch here. Unfortunately, this blind flipped, and because it would have been so glorious to have Bowmastered the Delver before it became Insectile Aberration. But unfortunately, I'm taking a lot of damage. I need to figure out a way out of this. So I ponder. Let's see what I see. Double Force Sink into the Stupor. I don't think this is going to do it. Now, I could absolutely Sink into Stupor and then bounce that Delver to hand and then later delete it with Orcish Bowmasters. But my thinking is that's probably a shuffle. And we drew Sink into Stupor anyway. So I'm going to probably just cast a Psychic Frog and try to jump the Psychic Frog in front of it. So I cash in one of my TAMIYO clues, and yeah, Psychic Frog here. I've got lots of cards in hand. I've got lots of cards in my graveyard that I can potentially exile to jump the frog. So that's what I do. I jump the frog. Generally, you want to block before you start discarding, just so you don't take damage. Yeah, so that was a little suboptimal thing, because that way, at least, even if they deal with the frog somehow, you're not taking the 3 damage. But instead, I started pitching cards first. But my opponent apparently doesn't have a bolt or anything, and I think they make a questionable play of trying to cut me off black when they have 0 lands in play. And I don't think that's going to play well for them, because now I have a frog in play, and I can just attack them a whole lot. So I can do 3 there. It's not a lot of damage, but it is going to allow me to flip my TAMIYO there. And so TAMIYO is now ticking up, and my opponent has basically no mana here. So I won. They just conceded after realizing that they had kind of like dug themselves in too deep of a hole, wastelanding. There's this saying that when 2 legacy players are wastelanding each other, one of the players is probably wrong to be doing so. All right. So here we go with the island opening. I have a really strong anti-creature hand here. I'm going to go ahead and blast it on the stack before they can get any value from it. They daze, which is fine. Again, like against Delver on the draw, I just play into daze usually. I don't think you have much of a choice. So I'm able to come in with the Bowmasters, and they cannot convert. They've got 3 card types, so they can't find a 4th. So my Bowmaster is able to pick off this DRC, which is huge. Orcish Bowmasters really shines in the Delver matchup, by the way. Like, Delver has generally cut Orcish Bowmasters in favor of Psychic Frog, but Orcish Bowmasters is so good against them, in my opinion. They bolt. They kill one of my Bowmasters. They waste my land. I've got plenty of land, and I have Murktide Regent potentially dropping down next turn. I do cast Psychic Frog in a daze, and they don't have the daze. Okay, they have a frog of their own, which is not going to be as good because I've got Orcish Bowmasters, and I have 4 Fatal Pushes in my deck. So I think it's pretty rare in this series of games that you're going to see an opposing frog actually connect against me, just because of the 4 Fatal Pushes. And here I've got like a giant Murktide, and they concede. So Murktide, of course, can also block their Murktide. There's a lot you can do with these. All right, let's jump into the league. I'm up against runkor, and I have a list of the decks that everybody's playing here. Cradle Control. Right. This is a great hand against Cradle Control because I have Orcish Bowmasters, which is just an all-star against Cradle Control decks because they have lots of X1s. So I'm going to go ahead and Elvish Reclaimer, unfortunately one that Bowmasters cannot kill. It's a power corrupt creature, and it has X2 toughness instead of X1. It's a mighty elf. And here comes Guy's Cradle, which is normally terrifying, and I definitely could waste it here, but I decide to develop my board instead, and I play with the Psychic Frog. Psychic Frog, importantly, can stonewall attackers. People just don't want to attack into it. And my opponent goes and gets a second Dryad Arbor, and now they're Green Sun Zenithing for Grist. Now that's normally pretty dangerous, but I have a Bowmasters, and I can ping Grist. Also worth noting that the Elvish Reclaimer is now powered up and is a 3/4. But my opponent's board is pretty unimpressive, thanks to my Wasteland and my Orcish Bowmasters. So I'm happy to trade off with this land, and I think that was a very bad attack on their part. I'm not sure why they did that, because that was their only land. And they've got a Bojuka Bog, yes, but they're so far away from being able to activate Elvish Reclaimer. So TAMIYO comes down. Now they can activate Elvish Reclaimer. What they don't know is that I have a Stifle in hand. I am going to normally I would wait, but I'm just like, let's just get stifle this activation. Waste our land. And you can see just complete dominance on the board here. I mean, we can finish watching this game, but it's very much over. Yeah. And TAMIYO just doing continuing to draw cards. I can flip her, which I do. Yeah. So again, my opponent does find a land. They find an ignoble hierarch, which is just like a terrible top deck. Those kinds of cards. I think I actually forced the ignoble hierarch because I had nothing better to do, and I just wanted to keep pressing damage. I'm drawing a ton of cards here. Yeah. This card, I've learned that you definitely want to counter it. It can get out of hand pretty quickly. Springheart Nantuko. Also, when it's enchanting a creature, even if you kill the enchanted creature, it's not like an aura where it fizzles. It will still come into play as a creature. So, yeah, I learned that the hard way. Okay, and then the second game. All right, this is a strong keep. We've got a Bowmasters, we've got a Wasteland for their Cradle, we have Shielder's Edict, and we have a Murktide to potentially finish them off later. So Hierarch comes down. I'm not going to be able to poke that immediately, unfortunately. I have to wait. So I'm just going to be patient. No, I'm not going to be patient. I'm going to go ahead and ponder. I find a Force. I use the Force on the Nantuko, whatever it's called, Springheart Nantuko, just because I do respect that threat. All right, and yeah, we're going to go ahead and go to Bowmaster Town. Bowmasters, all it does is really have an initial ping, and then it can chump or trade with opposing creatures. They get the white of the Reliquary. Scary creature, but I have Shielder's Edict, which I deploy, and I think the correct play is to go ahead and TAMIYO here, and I do. Yeah, even late game, it can feel like, is TAMIYO even worth it? You know, but it usually is. It usually is. Some late games, I'll just pitch her to Force or, you know, brainstorm her back into the deck. Okay, so Endurance, I knew that this was possible, and look what I'm going to do. They're going to block TAMIYO, and I can just brainstorm to convert TAMIYO into a Planeswalker so that she survives. So now TAMIYO is going to be able to go up, and I've got this huge wall in the form of Murktide. They play another white, which is 7/7, very large. I can't force it. I don't have a blue card to go with my Force. So it may look like I'm in a bad situation, but I have a Psychic Frog. I think, yeah, I'm just going to attack here. And keep in mind, Psychic Frog has this interaction where it can buff the Murktide. So I go ahead and put some instants and sorceries into my graveyard. I do have to pitch the Psychic Frog here because I can't let Springheart Nantuko resolve. It could basically make a whole lot of white of the Reliquary because it attaches to that, and then every land drop, which white can immediately go get another land, that's going to trigger landfall, and it's going to create a copy of the white. So, yeah, that would not be good. So I do decide to force that. They swing in. Everything is debuffed by TAMIYO. I do chump the white, I believe, just to keep TAMIYO alive here. My opponent is cooking pasta. Yeah. So, they were attacking me, not TAMIYO, I think. They go ahead and get this to phase out my Murktide, which does work. And I'm kind of on my back foot here, but I have Go for the Throat, which I'm going to squarely aim at the white. That card is really good. It's like I can't think of a good reason to play Knight of the Reliquary now that White of the Reliquary is the same effect basically for 2 mana instead of 3. All right, and I'm just going to let them hit me for 2. It's not a big deal. And I think that was a mistake that they did that because now I can attack for lethal with the Murktide. So I used TAMIYO's minus ability to buff the Murktide. They might have thought they had an extra turn, but yeah, TAMIYO can like regrow. And regrowing the instant or sorcery triggers Murktide, so Murktide gets buffed, and I hit him for Xyranl. All right, next, Nuka-Cola. This is a fun match. So Nuka-Cola, of course, if you haven't played Fallout, is the cola of choice in the apocalypse. Okay, so once upon a time to start it off, so I know that I'm up against probably like some sort of big mana strategy. Vexing Bauble, quite vexing. Luckily, not impactful to my hand here. I've got a solid grip here. I think deploying TAMIYO, again, I'll almost always deploy her regardless of the matchup, just because she does generate value over time. I can't do anything about the One Ring. Turn 2 One Ring with Vexing Bauble. It's pretty busted. So here we go. We're coming in, creating our token. Even though we can't do combat damage, we still get the token. I'm able to flip her. I'm going to buffer or uptick her, and then I'm going to get a ponder here. Hey, I'm recording. All right. So my opponent has a ton of mana. What are they going to do here? They've drawn a bunch of cards. The game is not looking good for me, that's for sure. They Kozilek's just to draw a card. They surveil and draw, and they create some spawn tokens. I can't imagine what's in their hand that's like the best thing that they have to do. Disruptor Flute almost always names Wasteland, but here they name my Planeswalker. This game is basically over. I'm trying to think of like how I could win. Obviously, Bowmaster does something here, and I'm going to attempt a Bowmaster here. The other play, of course, is to just keep stifling the One Ring triggers, so that, yeah, they have Kozilek's Command here. So I do have a big Orc army, but they can just probably draw to more Kozilek commands. They have 4 in their deck, and they can draw 4 cards next turn. So I'm going to swing in for 5, get them to 7. I think here is where I do start stifling One Ring. They have another One Ring, and I stifle that. Do they have another One Ring? What's this? Oh, Kozilek's Command. Ouch. So basically, like, they've just removed all my threats. The Kozilek commanded 3 times. I don't have any more stifles. I'm going to have to Murktide and hope that this is hard for them to remove, because you need a Kozilek's Command with like 9 mana in order to remove. And they have another One Ring. So for those of you keeping track at home, that's 3 One Rings that have come out of their deck. They cycle their Vexing Baubles. So at this point, because of the One Ring, I can't attack or do anything profitably. I can Bowmasters here, and I think that's what I do. Crop rotation into Emrakul. Yeah, and I wasn't going to survive that. Even if I sacrifice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the Orcish Bowmasters, well, actually, because they hardcasted, they were going to get another turn. And they could have just bounced it with Karakas. So they can get infinite turns with Karakas, essentially. They've got so much mana. So, yeah, there wasn't a way that I was going to win that, unfortunately. Let me take a look at the One Ring would have only dealt 1 damage to them. Also, they can go get, like, they've got 6 cards in hand. They've got lots of outs. So, I don't think that was a premature concession. All right. This is such a fun matchup because it's like you really have to, like, be proactive against 12 posts, or things just get crazy quickly, as we saw with like back-to-back One Rings in the same turn. All right, so here we go. This is a solid opener versus them. I do board in Force Negation. It may seem like, oh, they've got a bunch of lands, their spells don't really matter, but the spells do matter. Like if you can counter a One Ring, that's a big deal. Okay, and this is where Damping Sphere comes into play. Damping Sphere has the ability of, if an opponent taps a land for more than 1 mana, it just produces 1 colorless mana instead. So it immediately has an impact on their Cloud Post. So it's kind of like a wastelanded one of their lands. Another cool thing that Damping Sphere does is it makes every spell cost 1 mana more if you've already cast a spell that turn. So it's like cumulatively, the first spell is no tax. The second spell is 1 mana that you have to pay tax. The third spell is 2 mana that you have to pay tax. But it gives you this opportunity to like brainstorm or cast a Bowmaster, something at flash speed, and then suddenly your Force of Will costs mana to cast, so you can get around Vexing Bauble. So it's kind of like doubly useful in this matchup because of Vexing Bauble. So Damping Sphere is definitely the best it's ever been, in my opinion, because of that. And I'm able to counter their spell, and they pack it in thanks to Damping Sphere winning that game. All right, let's go into this game, game 3. All right, and this is another Damping Sphere hand, even though it doesn't have anything else going on. The open Vexing Bubble. So I open Island Ponder, find a Brainstorm. And I didn't shuffle that Ponder, so that means that I found good stuff here. Unfortunately, there is a card that they can use to get rid of Damping Sphere, which is, what is it called? Oh, so they're Kozilek's commanding. So I go ahead and I ping, and then Kozilek's command does draw a card, so I get to get a second activation here. I leave them with the mana. You could definitely argue that. Did I have the option of pinging this? I don't think I did. Okay. Actually, I should have had the option of pinging that. Maybe I should have pinged that instead. Okay, so they're plowing. They're still very limited in what they can do, but if they can find a Boseiju, they can get rid of my Damping Sphere. So I'm going to swing. And I have to counter this One Ring, but I can't counter it. And so that's probably the game right there. Unfortunately, they're going to be able to draw. It's not worth stifling the initial trigger. It is probably worth stifling subsequent triggers. So I get my Psychic Frog out. Also, I've been holding the stifle because I want to stifle Boseiju if they go for it. So they Disruptor Flute here, and I pitch a couple cards just in case they name Psychic Frog, but I think they are going to name Wasteland here. Yeah, they almost always name Wasteland, and then once they draw their second Disruptor Flute, that's when they name the other card that they are scared of. So I'm able to connect here, and I don't discard. I opt instead to keep the cards in my hand, but again, they do have an active ring. They're drawing a bunch of cards, and they have tons of mana. So the Kozilek come in. I don't have the mana to sink into Stupor, the Kozilek command, so I am going to lose my buffed up Psychic Frog. All right, TAMIYO, again, a little late to the party. We're swinging in. They are able to block this. At this point, TAMIYO doesn't really help. They're at 7. Okay, so this is where things get pretty intense. So keep in mind, this entire time I've had Damping Sphere to hold them back, but I can't do anything about Damping Sphere. It's not a spell or a permanent, so sink into Stupor. So they just unlocked a ton of mana, and they can immediately use that mana. So I sink into Stupor their One Ring just to avoid the ability, because I can attack for 5, 6. I can't attack for... Oh, wait, I'll be able to attack for 7 if I discard my hand. But they still have something else to do. What are they going to do here? Kozilek's command, just removing that. Okay, and that's so clutch. Like Kozilek's command, they've cast 3 of them this game. That card, it does so much. It's really powerful, and it's really crucial in this matchup. So, Consign to Memory, a little too late. I'm going to try to use it, but I'm doing 4 damage here. They are drawing 4 cards this turn. A Ponder finds Brazen Borrower. Okay, and this is where like I definitely could have Brazen Borrowered with the One Ring activation on the stack and left them with 6 cards instead of... But if I'd done that, then they would have been able to recast it and gotten another protection trigger. So I'm not sure that was the right call. Also, they're doing this during their upkeep because they're at 3 life. They're about to take 3 damage. They have to find some way to stop the 3 damage from the One Ring. So I believe at the beginning of your lose... Okay, so this trigger was still on the stack. So had I bounced it, they wouldn't have taken that damage. And they would have just recast it. So now I feel like, okay, there's nothing I could have done. Bouncing it would not have saved me. Do you understand why? Let me just repeat. If I bounce here, they no longer take any damage from this trigger because there are no longer any burden counters on the One Ring because it's not in play. So they survive the turn. Then they can just recast the One Ring and have protection from everything for another turn. So yes, it would have prevented them from drawing, but it wouldn't have. But they would have just lived, and they would have also gotten rid of this problematic ring that's doing 3 damage to them each turn. So at this point, like my fate was kind of sealed by that Kozilek's command on the Orc army. Yeah, and they are able to draw crop rotation, which they use to get a Glimmer Post. So they gain life and they survive the One Ring. They've got 11 cards in their hand. They have another One Ring, which I consign to memory. But I think they have another One Ring. Yeah, because they drew so many cards. So here they have just so much mana. They got protection for everything. I just know that the game's over. They name Force of Will. They're not even worried about my Psychic Frog. So I play out a second Psychic Frog, but there's nothing I can do here. Again, like because the One Ring has that ETB trigger, it's just you can bounce it, but you're just gonna give them protection from everything again. Kind of frustrating. And then they have Karn, and then they go get Mycosynth Lattice, and they lattice me out, and I can bounce the Mycosynth Lattice, but it doesn't really matter because I think they have protection from everything here. So it's just kind of a tearjerker, really. Yeah, and I can't attack. But, like, I think I played that well. I'd welcome any feedback you all have on that. Heart Attack Muffin. Let's see what they're on. Heart Attack Muffin on Grixis Delver. So I'm not sure if I knew that they were going to be on Grixis Delver because a lot of people move around a lot. But I have a solid hand in general. I mean, I'm not going to throw back hands like this. It had 4 lands, but one of them sinking into the super. So sinking into super, again, like these modal lands, whatever they're called, I can't remember the acronym. But these are really useful because it's a spell that you can pitch to force. It has text. I mean, I've already cast it a lot in these matches. Orcish Bowmasters coming in quick. Stifle on their fetch. They are really behind the 8 ball here. And, of course, I have Wasteland for the Urza Saga. I'm surprised they're playing Urza Saga in a deck with Noble Hierarchs and stuff. The only, like, I guess, fair, like, big mana deck that I see Urza Saga in generally is Cephalid Breakfast. And you don't even really see that much these days because Cephalid Breakfast is pivoted largely to using cards like Delighted Halfling or Cavern of Souls instead of Urza Saga. All right, so Heart Attack Muffin's coming back. We completely destroyed them game 1. So I think did I have Heart Attack Muffin as... No, they're on Maverick is what I put. So sorry, earlier I said they were on Delver. Obviously they're not on Delver here. Okay, Bird of Paradise. I mean, these X1 mana dorks, it's really hard. Even though the number of Bowmasters getting played has dropped a lot. Yeah, and so they are on some sort of Nadu strategy, like Bant Nadu maybe. They've got a lot of Wastelands, and I am lucky to have non-basics here. Or basics, rather. So here, I'm going to do the trick. The Endurance, probably thinking they're going to get a free lunch, but I can turn TAMIYO into a Planeswalker, and that's what I do. Once Upon a Time, Hardcast. Endurance does come in and does do 2 damage to TAMIYO, but it's not a big deal because I can buff TAMIYO 2 each turn. So this is a longer game, and you're going to see just how powerful TAMIYO is. So they do attempt to Wasteland me, and I just stifle just to keep that land. Stifling their Wasteland is almost like stifling one of their lands in the sense that they're losing land and I'm keeping my land. And boom, there's another Wasteland-like effect. Orcish Bowmasters taking out their Birds of Paradise. They come in. I'm not even going to bother blocking because TAMIYO can buff herself 2 each turn, and she's debuffing the Endurance. All right, Psychic Frog in the house. They can no longer attack profitably. Even with this Noble Hierarch, I think it'd be a mistake to attack in, and they agree. So now we're going to go into TAMIYO land, Murktide. So we're so far ahead, it's not even funny. Just because they've never really been able to assemble a critical amount of mana. So what happened there was I did force their Ramanap Excavator because Ramanap is like every turn it's a land out of the graveyard, and I do have wasteland. I do have a wastelandable lands, and they have lots of wastelands. It may not have been necessary to force that just because they were already so far behind, and maybe I wanted to hold that for like a Nadu or something that would potentially end the game. So I was about to draw, 21 cards. Probably among them would be a Psychic Frog, which I could then, use to flying attack for a whole lot. They were not going to live very long anyway against my Murktide region, so I just consider this like a total victory. Maverick in 2024, don't let your friends do it. From Mars to Sirius, it's a cool name. They are on Delver, so let's watch what they do. So this is a really good anti-Delver hand because Delver, Daze is surprisingly good against Delver because they're dazing stuff themselves or wasting. I will almost always board out my forces when I'm not playing Beanstalk. Now we have the luxury of being able to board out our forces, but when you're playing Beanstalk, you can't board those out. But now, since we're relying on TAMIYO instead, I board out the forces, but I keep the dazes in these Delver matchups. All right. So Polluted Delta, I can go fetch a basic, and I can do Basic Island Ponder, and I think I like all those lands just because it is Delver, right? You're going up against, how do they beat you? They take away your lands. So I could have dazed this, but that would have set me back. So instead, I opted not to daze. And I'm not sure why I didn't daze there. Because I think I was worried that if I dazed, I'd be really far behind. So I have daze for their daze. Do they have a second daze? I have a second daze. I think that's why. Because I knew I had Psychic Frog. So I'm like, sure. You want to go crazy with me? Let's go crazy. I actually let them connect. Because... I'm going to have Bowmasters next turn, and it's going to be painful for them to connect. I'm able to daze the Petty Theft here. They're able to daze my daze. Did they have the daze earlier? Could they have double dazed earlier? Anyway, I do draw a Fatal Push, which is clutch. Again, the reason we play 4 Fatal Pushes is to stop shenanigans like opposing Psychic Frogs that are protected by daze. They have a third daze. So we're really getting the daze treatment this game. And here we go with Bowmasters. It connects. We get some equity off of their Bauble trigger. I'm able to waste them down a land. So they only have 2 of their colors. They don't have black anymore. Murktide. Can I deal with a Murktide? Unfortunately, I don't think I can. I have Dismember, and that helps. I have Fatal Push. But this is where playing like the 1 mana removal instead of the 2 mana removal, like Go for the Throat or like Shieldred's Edict, this is where it comes to bite you. They're swinging in. And all right. I draw a Murktide on my own, which is going to be big. And I have a Brazen Borrower here. So I'm going to go ahead and cast this. I'll attack first. They bolt it. That's fine. I'd rather than bolt the Orcish Bowmasters than bolt my face when I'm super low. Here comes the Murktide. They have a Brainstorm. All right. Brainstorm does not yield a Force of Will, so we're in. And we have the bigger Murktide. They have a Dragon Rage Chandler. They have Molten Collapse. So this is, I'm pretty proud of this play because this is why, people say that Daze and Wasteland are like a combo. Well, Daze and Stifle and Wasteland, like they are like peanut butter, jelly, and bananas. All right, so Molten Collapse. I'm going to Daze this. They're like, sure, I'll just fetch. Oh, no, you won't. Daze Resolve. I still have the bigger Murktide. And next turn, they're going to have to crash into my Murktide with their DRC because the DRC has to fight. And if they don't, of course, I've got it covered with Petty Theft. And so when I Petty Theft this, they're basically done. They're going to have to recast it. We've both got our own Brazen Borrowers waiting in the wings that we can cast out. I think it makes sense to brainstorm here just to see what we can find. We find another Stifle. We find a fetch. Stifle's not what I'm really looking for right now. Brainstorm again. We find a Dismember, which is not a bad card. Dismember plus a Brazen Borrower can kill a 6/6 Murktide. I opt not to attack here for some reason. I think because I'm so low. Yeah, we've got all the removal we need to kill these, though. So I'm going to go ahead and... I think I play out the Flooded Strand just to shuffle if I need to. I'm just being very patient here. They have to attack in, and I can block both of these. And they attempt to bolt here, but I can respond by shrinking their Murktide to a size where it's not going to kill my Murktide with this member. And that costs me a lot of life and puts me in danger. But again, I've got like a giant Murktide, and now I can't quite start attacking in. I still have to be patient, but then I draw a Psychic Frog. Great card that I can just jump Psychic Frog up in front of that Brazen Borrower and trade. And that means I can start attacking in with a Murktide here. But I'm careful. I just attack with the Orc Army because I just don't want to lose. I'm at 3. I think that maybe was a little bit too cowardly. Because again, Psychic Frog, if they have a bolt, they have a bolt. They can kill me either way. All right, they got another DRC that has to attack in. I can just wait. TAMIYO, I go ahead and cast her even though she's probably not going to do anything in this game. I do swing in, and I am able to... They don't block, and I'm able to do the trick with Psychic Frog to make it lethal. So I buff it up to 12. It's going to be a 12-12. There's one more trigger on the stack when they concede. So yeah, I think that was a pretty well-navigated game by me, if I may toot my own horn. Let's go to game 2. Again, this is a deck that I have a lot of respect for. This player, I think, plays tons of Delver. So being able to pick apart Delver like I did, and it definitely feels good because I think when you're new to Legacy, like the first few years, people are just like trouncing you with Delver. And it's taken me a while to really figure out the play patterns and figure out how to survive against them, what to prioritize. I still lose to them from time to time, but... as you can see, like if you play carefully, you can book their Wastelands and their Dazes and their late game Lightning Bolts. All right, so we're doing the Orcish Bowmaster footsies. So this, I look incredibly unfavored here, right? Like they've got a Bowmaster. I don't. They've wasted me down to 1 land. I do have 2 Bowmasters in hand. I am going to happily... trade my Bowmaster token for theirs, the Orc Army token. I draw a 2nd land. This is great. I'm not going to waste any time. I think I'm just going to go ahead. Well, I'm going to wait and see what they do here, but they decide not to attack. Okay, so end step, I am going to Bowmasters here. They're going to Daze. Again, you have to play into Daze against Delver. I think people are like, oh, Daze is no problem. Just wait and play later. You don't have time against Delver. You do need to play into Daze a lot. Okay, and I'm able to get a little bit of extra benefit because I have a Bowmaster in play when their Ponder resolves, so I've got a 2-2 army instead of a 1-1 army. They remove my Bowmaster, they bounce my army, so we're back to square one. I've got a pretty boring, non-interactive hand, but they have 1 card in hand because they've like drawn and played a lot of lands. They're able to brainstorm, but because they played so many lands out, they aren't able to put all the lands back they could have put back. Now they're hellbent with a TAMIYO in play. I can remove TAMIYO, and I can start attacking with Psychic Frog. And we've all seen how this unfolds. You know, like, I have an engine, they don't. Bring out my TAMIYO. I can't attack in with TAMIYO, but, like, they're so far behind on cards, they brainstorm, and they see that they're not going to be able to beat this Psychic Frog. And to be fair, their deck is not as well positioned to be able to deal with Psychic Frog. They're playing Lightning Bolts instead of Fatal Pushes, and Lightning Bolt doesn't kill Psychic Frog in this position because I can discard 2 cards to it. So, yeah. And even if I attack with TAMIYO, I can get the trigger, and then I can also brainstorm to flip TAMIYO before combat damage so I get the Planeswalker. So they were really on their back foot. Again, I converted like a really low resource opening where I had a swamp and that was it into a victory. And it was all around me eventually drawing land. There's a saying, screw beats flood. Well, we just saw that there. They were flooded. I was screwed. on mana, and eventually I drew out of it, and I just was able to keep casting Bowmasters until they couldn't answer them all. They answered them all, but answering them all cost them all the resources they had. All right, and I think this is the last game of that league. So let's take a look at that, and then I've got to get on the plane to Japan. Okay, so let's take a look here. So I won the die roll, and this is a pretty good hand. What am I up against here? Up against Moon Stompy. All right, you are going to see some disgusting stuff. Moon Stompy is just, wow. It's just like so strong. Okay. But there's a card that's extremely strong against Moon Stompy, and I am on the play. So I'm going to go ahead and start by playing my, what do I play here? I almost clicked through my my second main phase. Okay, so I think we open with Brainstorm here, and we just see if we can find a force. Because really, Moon Stompy, you have to survive the first turn, and then you might be okay. Do we find it? What do we see? Is it going to show what I... It didn't show. Okay, so we did shuffle because we didn't find a force. We found a TAMIYO, which is not what we want to see here. But this is what we want to see. Them playing a tapped land and passing instead of dropping some, 3-drop haymaker like Trinisphere or Blood Moon, of course, being the most dangerous for us. So now we can cast our Psychic Frog. They have 0 main deck removal for this. They have Fury. They Unlicensed Hearse doesn't matter here. I can start attacking in, and I'm just going to discard. I discard like my whole hand except for Brazen Borrower and Stifle. I decide I like the flexibility of being able to stop an activated ability, triggered ability, or balance a problematic permanent. So I decide to keep that, and I don't do as much damage as I could. Actually, I pitched the Stifle too. I decided to pitch that. So I draw a fetch. I play the fetch out because I can go get a basic island. Otherwise, I would have just held it. But since I can go get a basic island, I'm like, okay, cool. You got Blood Moon. I'm going to use the mana. I'm going to cast Brazen Borrower. And now I'm attacking you for effectively like 10 a turn. So it's like a 2-turn clock. And they scoop to that. Now, going back in. All right. So that was, you got to mull aggressively. I mulled the 5 here, but I do have a force effect. I have Dismember for Magus of the Moon, and I have a Wasteland in case they seem to get stuck on mana, and I've got a way to get either a basic island or a basic swamp. Probably a basic island. They turn 1 Blood Moon. I force. So again, against Moon Stompy, you always get the force. You mull until you have a force. Okay, and they have a pretty slow start. I waste their first Ancient Tomb, but they have another one. Unfortunately, this happens from time to time. Okay, and Goblin Rabblemaster. Well, the good news is his trigger doesn't go on the stack until we begin combat. So I'm just going to go ahead and take 4 damage, and I'll go fetch probably my basic island. Yeah, and I'm going to dismember this. All right, Brainstorm. We got our second land. We've got a Force Negation if we need to cast it. If we don't need to cast it, we have Psychic Frog. Now, Psychic Frog is not nearly as strong as it usually is. Here, I just fetch my swamp, and I'm like, cool, you can have your Blood Moon, because I've got my 2 colors. The only card in my deck that I can no longer cast is I can't cast Brazen Borrower, like hard cast it, because I don't have a second island, and I can't cast Murktide. So that's 4 cards in my deck that I can't cast. And I guess I can't cast Sink into Stupor, because that's 2 blue and 1 colorless. I can still play it as a land. All right, and now I feel pretty in command. Like, I can stop a critical spell if I absolutely need to. Let's see what they play here. I do stop something. What do I stop? What did I force? Oh, I just pitched. Okay, yeah. And I can just pitch every turn. I can pitch 2 cards, grow it. Yeah, I don't care about Magus of the Moon. I can jump over Magus of the Moon if I need to. I'm not even keeping around Go for the Throat. So, yeah, Frog solos Moon Stompy. So that was a pretty good league. I think that was a 4-1. I just lost to the big mana deck, and that was a very close game. So that was like, in our hearts, that was a trophy, right? I've got some more matches. Unfortunately, I don't really have time to go through them. Let's see. I think there was. I'll do one more. Let's do one more. I'll do two more. My wife's looking at me, shaking her head. No. I'll do them very quickly. 10 minutes. Okay, so let's go over to this one. This is I think it's another Delver one. Yeah, Grixis Delver. Okay. Again, I love these tempo on tempo. It's just like, for me, like tempo on tempo is the most exciting Magic, because it's really anybody's game, and both players are like putting themselves in danger with every decision to wasteland. Every time they daze, every time they cast a cantrip, there could be like a Bowmaster coming down. It's just like so exciting. And I'm really happy that like tempo decks are so powerful in Legacy, because it's like so much more interesting than combo versus combo, for example, or control versus control, heaven forbid. Okay, so here we go. I am able to stifle their fetch. There was a little bit of a fight. I mean, look at how thick my graveyard is with stuff after that fight. But yeah, we did stop their fetch. So I have a land, they don't. Now, I have two lands, and I have a Murktide. Are you going to daze this? You can't daze it. Are you going to force this? They do force. So now So that's what I'm talking about, like the decisions. They decided to wasteland me there, even though they had nothing else going on. I had nothing going on my table, but I do have a lot of lands in hand. TAMIYO comes down. I stifle another land. So they have, as far as I can tell, 0 lands in hand. They've got 4 cards. One of those might be a land. I've already got a wasteland. I don't think they're playing any basics. They play a Delver. I'm just going to go ahead and Bowmasters. They force the Bowmasters. I'm going to attack here, get my token. I do think I waste them off their land. Yeah. But I do it after I make sure that my Psychic Frog is going to resolve. All right, and that's it. Like, I mean, that's what turn are we? We're on turn like 4, maybe. Turn 7. Okay, so a lot happened in those 7 turns, but you can see like turn 7, and this is all that's on the table. Like, so much interaction back and forth. They cast 2 Force of Wills. I cast, I think, 2 Stifles. Also cast, let's see what over here. Dazes. Like, it was just like a flurry of spells, and one person has the board presence at the end of it. The other doesn't. So exciting. All right, and let's go to game 2. And again, Stifle is really the mirror breaker in these tempo mirrors, because Stifle just means that you effectively have even more ways of stopping their development. All right, so they're on the play. They wisely fetch around my Stifle. They cast a Delver. Now, when your opponent has a Delver, they can also do the Delver trick where they can flip their Delver. They can take a look and then see what they're going to draw and choose what they want to reveal before they draw. And that's what they do. So now they draw their card after they've revealed. They revealed the Brainstorm. Swinging in for 3. All right. I've got both of my basics. They Pyroblast my Stifle. A lot of respect for Stifle here. They don't want to get. They don't want what happened last game to happen again. They come in with the Delver, or with the Insectile Aberration, the Flip Delver. They force my Psychic Frog. They're down to 2 cards in hand to my 5, and I have more lands. So I'm way ahead in terms of permanents, like if you just count like sheer cards. But they have a clock. They're hitting me for 3 every turn. I waste their land. And I do that, by the way, I always waste during their upkeep, just in case they do have Stifle. That way they have to use mana during their turn to counter my Stifle, so they can't do stuff. They have less mana to do stuff with. I think this is a situation where we jump the frog. We're at 10. I don't want to take any more hits. I'm jumping the frog. Let's do it. I have a lot of pretty bad cards. I don't think Swamp matters at this point. Sinking in the Stupor could probably go. What do I pitch? Swamp. Bolt. Okay. At this point, it's dead anyway. Like I can pitch more cards, but I'm not gonna be able to get it up to 7 toughness because it's gonna take 3 from the Delver. It's taking 3 from the Bolt. I could daze this actually. I think I should have dazed here. I didn't even think about that, but they don't have any more mana. I think what I do is I let it go. But I should have dazed here, 100%. That was a misplay. No, I do daze. Okay, good. But they have a force. Okay, I knew this frog was going to die. I wasn't sure exactly how. So yeah, I did the correct thing. And you'll note that I dazed my sewer back to hand because I value selection at this point. I don't take any damage because I did all the growing and everything after I had already blocked. So this is what I was talking about earlier. Always block first, then start putting your triggers on the stack. So worst case scenario, at least you don't take the 3 damage from the Delver. I'm able to successfully remove the Delver, and now I feel pretty good because I have the same number of cards in hand, but I've got a lot of land. I've got a Ponder. I saw a Murktide there. That's going to be very powerful. Murktide's like the best card in the mirror because, they're going to have to smash their DRC into it. They do have force, but that force puts them to Hellbent. And I brainstorm and I find the daze. Yes. So the game is over. Basically, they're going to crash in unless they have the Pyroblast. They do have the Pyroblast. My goodness. So I'm under the gun again. And I draw a land, which is not useful here. I do have the ability to sink into Stupor to bounce it to hand. They bolt me. They bolt in response to the fetch, probably thinking like, I don't know what they thought I was going to get, but Surveil TAMIYO to the graveyard. That would have been a terrible draw at this point. They've got the DRC back. We knew it was going to come back, and it's going to be lethal this turn. We cast our Bowmasters, not to interact with them in any way, but just to be mana efficient. Brainstorm. Oh, yeah, we find it. Raise and Borrow. We bought ourselves another turn, and I was able to waste their remaining land. So now they have to find a land in order to recast it. Now, I do have the Brazen Borrower on deck to help me win this race, but it's just basically the top of their deck versus our 2 Bowmasters. So we get 5 mana in, or 5 damage each turn in, and Dismember is a way to answer their permanent, so we feel pretty good here, but they could draw a Bolt if they had land Bolt. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that they necessarily did anything wrong there, but the result was I was able to kind of slip out of their grasp. The last match I'm going to show you very quickly. Very, very quickly. This is... I show you this because it's a really interesting deck. I'd never played against it in this incarnation. If you've ever heard of Bomberman, it's like a, 10, 15-year-old deck, 20-year-old deck maybe. But it's like a red-white deck that, and I don't know what I'm up against. I'm like, all right, I guess I'll daze that Chalice just because I do have a Ponder in hand. And I don't know what they're on, so it just buys me time to like learn a little bit more about their deck. I assume I'm on like they're on Moon Stompy, but then they play Goblin Engineer, and I'm like, oh, okay. Are they on Painter? Because Painter with white, interesting, and fetches. That's weird. Why would a Painter deck be playing fetches? I don't know. Painter decks might play fetches. Okay, so I'm coming in. I'm just dumping my hand. Like, okay, can you deal with this? I do keep Bowmasters just because it's a good all-around card. They exile Dismember, which doesn't matter. Agatha's Soul Cauldron is either amazing and insane, or it does almost nothing. And I'm hoping that it does nothing. But then they resolve Glaring Fleshraker. They give and they activate the Lion's Eye Diamond. They put this card, Ararch Salvagers, into their graveyard. Ararch Salvagers, you can pay 1 colorless and 1 white and return target artifact with mana value 1 or less from your graveyard to your hand. So this is an infinite loop. You just keep returning Lion's Eye Diamonds and keep sacking it, and you can keep buffing. You're going to get infinite triggers through this. And because this combo takes forever to execute, I don't mean to be a dick, but like my opponent chose to play a deck that like takes forever to like win with, and they had to do this loop like 16 times, which each time is like probably like 10 clicks or something like that. So I make them do it. And they go from like being ahead on time to like being really far behind, just in case there's another game. I'm not too proud to play to the clock. I do want to win here, and it's totally within my right, because otherwise, like, there are lots of decks that are extremely clicky that I don't play. Like, I don't play Alurin anymore on MTG. I don't even play Espervile because there was too much clicking, and I was going to time too often. So it is a factor, but you can see they're like 12 minutes just from one victory. So I have a very serious shot at them not being able to win if I can get through this. There, I can sign to memory their Chalice just to keep my Fatal Push alive. I'm building up value, and I'm hoping that this game goes a little bit longer than the last one. Here's the Flesh Raker. I daze it. The reason I daze it is because I realized that they can... why did I daze there? I think I realized that they would be able to potentially go off, but they can go off anyway. Because they... and then they get the Goblin Engineer. The Goblin Engineer goes and gets Agatha's Soul Cauldron. Next turn, they can swap the Lion's Eye Diamond for the Soul Cauldron, and then they can, if they have RX Salvagers in their hand, I'm already dead. There's nothing I can do, right? And it's basically like a janky 4-card combo, but they have the combo. Let's see, they're going to activate, so they get Agatha's Soul Cauldron in play. They activate Lion's Eye Diamond, and of course, one of their 2 cards in hand is RX Salvagers. So this is just one of those things, like, I don't know what the statistics are on this deck. I can't imagine that this deck is favorable in any way, because you're just, like, you're playing kind of janky cards. Yeah, this is the driver. So, yeah, that's going to conclude. Why? Okay, so yes, I think it's unlikely that that is going to happen. So yeah, they win. So again, like, we're doing most of the winning. I just wanted to showcase a couple matches where we lost. The main takeaways from this deck, again, like, I feel very happy with this. This is what I'm going to play in Japan. I do think that 2-color is stronger than 3-color. It's just more reliable. It's simpler. You don't get color screwed at all because you always have both of your colors. So definitely, if you're thinking about going to a tournament and you have access to 4 TAMIYO and 4 Psychic Frog, I recommend this deck very strongly. And I think it'll be interesting to, like, figure out exactly the right number of stifles and dazes that I want to have in the deck. But until next time, be excellent to each other and party on, dudes.